Welcome, everybody, to a conversation we're calling Moguls and Motherhood. We're going to have a fabulous panel discussion in just a bit. To start us off, please welcome Alexis Lombre, wonderful composer and piano player. She's going to play her original composition called Blues in Time. And thank you again, Alexis, for starting us off at the beginning with that original composition of yours, Blues in Time. Welcome, everybody, to AARP Illinois, a conversation we're calling Moguls and Motherhood. We're going to have a wonderful chat about leadership and family today. My name is Heather Ireland Robinson. I'm the executive director of the Jazz Institute of Chicago, and I am joined by three wonderful women here in Chicago and in the Midwest. We have Amy Wishnick of Wishnick and Associates. She'll tell you a little more about herself in her intro. Thank you, Amy, for being here. We have NIKKI Romain from Peoria, who has a fabulous organization of arts called Arts Re-envisioning Tomorrow, and Dr. Paris Thomas, who is the executive director of Equal Hope. And I'm welcoming all these women here today as we have this conversation to talk about leadership and motherhood and all the wonderful things that we do to make sure the ship keeps going. So I'll ask each of you just to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your organization and just a little bit about yourselves. We'll start with Amy.
Great. Thank you, Heather. I'm really delighted to be part of this lovely group. So I started Wishnick and Associates 20 years ago. I am a consultant working with nonprofits on executive leadership transition and search, governance, and lots of strategic planning, which is how I met Heather. I started it since we're going to weave in motherhood here. It was it's my, I don't know what, fourth iteration, I suppose, of myself, but I started it when one of my kids was going off to college and the other one was starting high school. And part of wanting to be on my own was so that I didn't have to miss out on the ball games.
Thank you, Amy. NIKKI.
Hi, yes, I am NIKKI Romain. I am the executive director and co-founder of Artists Re-envisioning Tomorrow, which we also call Art Inc. And we're located here in Peoria, Illinois. I founded it with my husband. We purchased an old abandoned school building, 50,000 square foot, and we've turned it into an arts and culture center. So our mission here is to inspire and empower the community through arts, education, and culture. And we do that through our programming. So we provide after-school programming. Basically, the kids come in, they get help with their homework, and then they go off and do various arts activities, whether it's singing, dancing, acting, STEAM, coding, all types of arts-related stuff. If it's something arts-related, we're either doing it or we want to do it. And then we have another component. It's a paid internship program for teens, where the teens also help with tutoring, they help with teaching, but then they also break off into their own projects, whether it's resume building, financial literacy, all types of things to help them, college application, all types of things that teens need. But it started, both of my husband and I were saved by the arts when we were younger. And I really just wanted a place where, you know, I believe in that quote, like, be the change you want to see in the world. And I feel like this is my way of doing that. We're both from Chicago, but we moved here, and Peoria was rated one of the worst cities for Black people in 2015 or 2014. And we thought, what could we do that is in our power to do to help change that? And so we're both artists. So that's why we worked on creating this program and this nonprofit.
Wonderful. And Paris?
Yes, thank you, Heather, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel. My name is Dr. Paris Thomas. I'm the executive director of Equal Hope, which is a health equity organization here in Chicago, Illinois. We started in 2008 based on the breast cancer disparity showing that Black women were 62% more likely to die from breast cancer than white women here in the city of Chicago. And so we put several projects in place to really combat this, and we really came up with the overall hypothesis that structural racism was contributing to that disparity. And so we have three main projects. We collect research and data to really inform our other interventions, where we have outreach, education, and patient navigation, using individuals that actually come from the communities we serve to connect with more individuals and get them connected to care. We also do advocacy and policy work to ensure that legislation is put in place to ensure quality access for all individuals, regardless of race, creed, or color. And so Equal Hope has been around fighting the good fight, specifically in the cancer space for women. We work in breast and cervical. We've expanded into primary care as well, ensuring that women have access to primary care at no cost. And we're continuously growing and moving into clinical trials is the next piece to ensure that women of color are actually accessing clinical trials so that when we are offered drugs or treatments, we know that they've actually been tested on individuals that look like us. And so I've been with Equal Hope for the last 5 years. Similar to Amy, I had a job change. I used to evaluate hospital readmissions for the whole state of Illinois, which is a very long state if you have to drive it, which I was doing. Unfortunately, I had, well, not unfortunately, I had my first daughter and it was just a little bit too taxing. And so I really wanted to give back to the roots and the community I came from. And breast cancer actually runs in my family. My mother is a 2-time breast cancer survivor. And I'm fighting the good fight to ensure my daughters don't have to face these cancers or at least have access to quality care if they do.
Wonderful, you all. Thank you all so much for that. So, lots of activism, lots of choices made because of our circumstances, whether that was motherhood or just a belief in something, which I think makes each of what you all do super authentic. Quickly, executive director of the Jazz Institute here, been there for 6 years. And we do free education programs for young people and free public programs, including the Chicago Jazz Festival. We also have partnerships with school. And what propelled me into that, and we'll get into that for everybody in just a bit, is kind of the same thing, just believing the art should be available for everybody, that everybody has a right, whether it's crayons in the house or playing on the symphony stage, that creativity and the arts are a right and a need of everyone. So fulfilling that role now with a passion of mine, which is music and jazz. So I would love for each of you all to talk a little bit about your road to leadership. We're founders, we're executive directors. How did you land in that? NIKKI, you kind of touched on that a little bit. And as much as it's about your roles, your specific jobs now, but that leadership part of it as well. So if you have a story or a moment, now's a perfect time to share. Well, I know, Amy, you talked about the importance of, being at the baseball games. And so, coming out of maybe corporate where it was a little more rigid than that. NIKKI, for you and your husband saying, we want to make a change. We're going to leave Chicago, which I'm a Chicago girl. I love it here, and go to a small town and not just make roots, but make change. So how did you know how did you know that would work? What was inside you, NIKKI, maybe that made you say, no, we can do this?
Well, I would say, so I was living in Chicago and I met my husband at the African Arts Festival. He was already living in Peoria. So I
Okay.
moved here for love, which was also, that's another side note. That was very huge for me. I had never even lived with a guy, but yes. So that was already a huge leap of faith. And I'm a big city girl. I went to school at UNLV. I left there, graduated at Columbia, lived in LA, packed up my bags at 20 something years old, very, very, very independent and very big city. Okay. So I moved to Peoria. And so when Jonathan and I met, we talked about, he has a very fascinating story and he's an artist, a painter. And so he had, he would do talks with kids about motivating them and getting them out of the place that they were. And I had just written a one-woman show about my story in life and how the art saved my life. And we just talked about teaming up together and empowering people in that way. And then as time progressed, we just talked about doing something where we could have a more sustained impact in the lives of people that we're talking to. And then again, that article came out and he stumbled upon the building that we're in and he's like, hey, you want to buy a school building? And then we actually have another building that's 15,000 square feet, but he took the whole space up with his framing and everything that he does. And so we were just like, you know what? This will be a great way to do what we love, doing the arts, but also giving back to the community. So it really it was a a passion about what we do and not doing anything outside of our scope, right? Something that we love and that we knew would empower others. So whether a kid comes here and they want to grow up to be, an actor, singer like myself or artist, that doesn't matter. The art is the carrot to get them in here, to get them off the streets, to get them being creative, to get them doing projects that make them have pride in themselves. And that just translates into so many different areas, whatever it is they choose to go into in their lives. And so it was like a calling, to be quite honest. It was a calling that we were led to do. And I feel like every step of the way we've been doing this work, this is our 6th year. And we have really, so it went from just the 2 of us to now we have about 15 full-time employees. We have 20 YLT. So basically overall, we have about 40 to 50 employees now. We have grown tremendously in these 6 years. Yeah.
I have to say that, Nikki, your Jonathan sounds like my Jonathan.
You both have
A
Jonathans.
risk taker. It amuses me. But I met my husband when I was doing attorney recruiting at a large law firm. Actually, the match was made by somebody he grew up with who I met through my work. And it was sort of his epiphany, and the rest is history. And what's interesting and kind of led me on my path is that so we got married, and my kids are in their 30s. And as Heather alluded, I have grandchildren now too, with a 3rd one on the way this summer, our younger son and his wife, which is great. All boys. I'm surrounded by boys, which is why I love this kind of a get together. But I actually was going to go back to work after my first son was born. But in the 80s, when this happened, it wasn't like it is now. And I see my daughters-in-law and I see the differences. So I wound up being home for a few years and made my fun with a lot of volunteer work and a lot of leadership opportunities in the volunteer work. And then went back to work at a boutique executive search firm. And then, as I said, 20 years ago, when I started my consulting practice, it was because I wanted to be the decision maker, and I wanted to interact with my clients in an authentic way of meeting them where they were and not being told sort of by my boss that, well, you need to get them to make a decision, when I knew in my heart of hearts they were going to make a decision, but it was not going to be today, it was going to be next week. And so that for me has, this is like my most exciting adventure, being on my own. And I will say I've had some really pretty good ones too all along.
Yeah. Paris, what about you? What were you before Equal Hope? What was kind of your path, and how did you land in that coveted and exciting seat of executive directorship?
Yeah, so I've been in multiple areas as far as healthcare, whether it's the insurances, hospitals, or working through the actual government. But actually doing nonprofit work, I think, really changed my perspective on a lot of what is being done. So I started at Equal Hope as their community health manager. But in learning a lot of this, I've learned the importance of having leadership that reflect the community we're serving. And so in doing so, I was able to show my skill set, especially prove myself to the board and uplift myself to eventually sit in this seat as an executive director, which means a lot, not only to myself, but to our actual individuals who work here. They've said they love to see a woman of color sitting in this seat leading this work. And that's really been my journey, is to really lead them and show them the way that we can do this work and we can be the face of this work. And it's really important that our board supports us uplifting in a way. So that's kind of been my journey and trajectory into this role.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Nikki. I just want to say, I love a good, I started here and ended up executive director story. I love it. Yeah, go ahead, Nikki. I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask Paris, when you started at where you're at now, did you have your eyes set on executive director? Was that your intent?
It actually wasn't. I
Oh,
came
really?
here like really wanting to just make an impact. I think it didn't have the same structure it needed. And because I'm so passionate about this topic when we talk about cancer, I was like, I'm gonna come in here, do the Lord's work, and then, I may propel myself up elsewhere. I didn't think that that was the opportunity, but when it did present itself, I'm like, as I got more into the weeds, I got promoted to the director of program operations, and then executive director came open, and I was like, okay, if you guys believe in me, I believe in myself too, and I think I can do an amazing job at this, and I have been. So it definitely was not in the original eyesight of where I was going, but it evolved.
I love that. And the reason why I ask is because as an older person in my role, I'm always looking at a succession plan. So I'm just curious when you bring in new people, where their mindset is and how we as leaders can promote them to get to the seat that we will eventually lead.
I think that is such an important point when you say about looking at trajectory and how we uplift people. I'm doing the same now in my position. Who's the next person that, because God forbid something happened to me, I want this organization to continue, but who is that next person that would be able to lead? And I think they started to have that view a few years ago. And that's when I came into the conversation. So
That's wonderful.
It's wonderful to be in an environment like that, whether it's women, men, whomever, but to have that vision. Even Nikki, for you saying, I'm not going to be in this role forever, nor do I necessarily want to be. I think a lot of times, especially with founders, you hold on so tightly. And once it becomes time that you have to retire, or like you said, God forbid something happens, there's no one that you've poured water into or nurtured to come in so that the vision and the mission continues the way you want it to. So I think that's so powerful, just to be able to say, I'm looking at the past. I'm looking at the past, the present, and the future, and to be prepared for that. I think that's a beautiful view to have.
Each of you, Nikki and Paris, had said something that prompted me. Paris, when you said something about opportunity, that just really struck me, because my own career path has, I can look back retrospectively and see a theme, but everything was sort of an opportunity here or an opportunity there, and it just didn't go straight. And so I think being open to opportunities and being willing to listen and consider and things like that is really important. And Nikki, you're talking about succession planning. The fact is, if there weren't conversations like that, I wouldn't have as much work as I have, which is really great. But I appreciate that you are thinking about it now and that you're talking about it, because one of the things that I think is missing often is the leader of the organization opening up that conversation. Because, well, if I open up that conversation with my board, they're going to think this. But I think it's all part of maybe even being a vulnerable leader, which is being able to put out there and to be able to say what needs to be said, even if it's the hard thing to say, or the topic that you don't necessarily want to deal with. But I think that I guess maybe as I'm saying this, that part of what I believe is a good leader is people who are willing to say what needs to be said, and to and to take the heat if there's heat that comes with it or whatever. But you look to the person in the room who's gonna call it out or gonna name it or whatever.
And that's, I think, too, a part of being an authentic, vulnerable, but also authentic. And then I like what you said too, Amy, like, as I think of it, like, be prepared for the smoke, like prepare for the heat. But what's on the other side of that is, I did it, I said it, and now not only my organization, but the world is a better place. Amy and I talked about this briefly before, about what a wonderful time we live in as women, as mothers, that we can be more authentic. I do credit COVID with some of this, but I think it's just, we're in a time now where we can be more authentic as mothers, which is part of why I was so excited, I know you all were, to have this conversation, that we could actually be in a place where we could talk about motherhood, talk about being a wife, talk about being a woman, in a place where you don't get the cringe factor. Like there may be some areas in our professional life where you may hold back to say, I'm going to pick them up from, guess what my kids did today? And you may be on the precipice of wanting to express that very real part of yourself and that very real part of your life, but you may hold back because someone may think or may, say something. So as we go into talking about motherhood, Nikki, you told us a little bit of your love story. Amy, we heard a little bit of yours. um, let's talk about our roads to motherhood. Let's talk about what got us here. I heard two sons. I know, Nikki, you have a daughter. I know Paris has daughters. I was a boy mom until my 7-year-old came and was like, we're done with that. And now we've got all kinds of things happening in the house, and a blended family as well. So anybody else want to add a little bit more? Paris, you want to talk about your road to motherhood?
So my husband's name is not Jonathan. His name is Ricky.
I
But
love
we
it.
met in college, and we've kind of just been kind of your typical college love story. We've grown with each other. He graduated prior to me, and I was like, I'm gonna follow him to Cincinnati and get my master's there. My mom was panicking, like, come back to Chicago. What are you talking about? I'm like, no, I'm following my heart, and I'm gonna still do school. It's gonna all
Aw.
work out. So I did so, and we ended up having our first daughter. She's now 8. We also have the lucky chance of being pandemic parents. We actually have 2 kids that are 13 months apart, a boy and girl who are now
Oh, I
3 and
didn't
2
know.
years old.
Okay.
So I have 3 in total.
Wow. Your pandemic souvenirs.
Yes.
And I briefly shared, but so I feel the other thing I love about this panel is that we've got a lot of different ages and a lot of different experiences, and ages of children. I married late in life. I always wanted to be a mom. I grew up in a great family, knew I and brother, and just a great family, and always wanted to have that. So I was married at 40. Had my first baby at 40 as well. Do the math. But it was something that we both. My husband's 4-ish years older than me, but it was something that we all both always wanted. And he had a son who's now my son, who was 9 at the time, is now 23. And then we had 2 more kids after. So, being a late in life mom, so one baby at 40, one at 46, and no complications, no issues or anything. So really an answer to a prayer and a blessing that both of us, had hoped for. He wanted a bigger family, he wanted more. And so that's a different perspective for us too, whether it's younger parents at kindergarten where we're the older parents, or just the wisdom that we have, or just the path that we took, to kind of get to parenthood, and even marriage for each of us. So how do you all, I mean, I love a good balance story, but does anybody have any thoughts about balancing motherhood and working? And Amy, I would love for you to talk about your story, and like you said with your daughters-in-law, how that's changed so much, but some of your early balancing stories, or not, y'all. It could be a didn't
I-
work one time situation. But Amy, I know you've got some insight.
Thanks, Heather. I appreciate that. I mean, my balance story actually is that I went back to work at the law firm for 3 or 4 months. I loved working. I had my first job when I was in 8th grade. I loved to work. But at that time, the person that I worked most closely with, because the attorneys who I worked with closely, kind of the chair of the recruiting committee, rotated. And the person didn't get it. And would call me at 11 o'clock at night. And frankly, in those days, part-time in a law firm was 5 days a week from 9:30 to 2:30. And I actually had to really kind of hold my own and say, no, I can't stay for this 4:30 meeting, which was huge. So I actually was home with my kids for a while, which was hard for me because I love to work and I missed it desperately. And we spent a lot of time walking around bookshops, and whatever. And so trying to figure it out. But I did actually have the opportunity then to do some volunteer things that I wouldn't have been able to do that have been very meaningful to me.
Mhm.
And I see now my daughters-in-law, you know, I don't think she'd mind if I said this, but our daughter-in-law has, had our first two grandchildren who are now 5 and 2. She was carting back, and she had 2 sets of nursing machine, milking machines. I don't know, is that what they're called?
Breast
This-
pumps, but yes,
breast
that's
pumps,
fine.
thank you, breast pumps.
That's what
But
they
she had
do.
one at the office, and she would close her door and she would put a sign on her door, and it's like, oh my gosh. Like, I mean, that is it's the norm. It should be the norm now. It was not nearly the norm in my day. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate, frankly, the sisterhood that she has with her friends and with the blogs and things like that, that just weren't there because they were, the good and bad of the internet, but it wasn't there. There were no places for me really to go answer some of the questions that I would have liked to have had answered. But the being a grandmother piece, wait for it, because it's really great.
Oh.
And
And
wait, you
different.
have sons and grandsons? Is
And
your
brothers.
summer baby?
And brothers, and the summer baby's a boy.
Ah!
No, it's it is what it is. But
It
I
is what it is.
sometimes think that maybe it was meant to be, because I think I do prefer playing cards to maybe doing tea parties.
The tea parties are really fun.
I actually really would like to get into that someday. Maybe. I hold out hope.
I'm seeing a
I've
tea
got a
party,
niece.
ladies.
She's great.
I'm seeing us, right? A niece.
I love it.
Mhm. Anyone else want to add to the balance or lack thereof? It's not easy. I know TD Jakes had a quote. Somebody asked him the question once about how do you do balance, and he said, "You can't. Like some days home will win, some days work will win, and home will lose," and that has helped me a lot. And you right the ship the next week. We've had a lot going on in our family the last week, and I was like, I just need a day to clean the house, and I made peace with myself about the house not being where I want it to be today. And that sounds like a simple thing and kind of cliche, but I said, wait, you have Saturday. Just get to Saturday. The kids are happy and fed and all the other things are taken care of. So that quote has helped me a lot. Like, okay, who's not losing, but where are we gonna back off for this week and then catch up next week or next day or next month or next year, if need be.
I don't have much to add to the balance. I mean, I agree with you. It's a constant balance, right? It's a constant, we're trying to figure it out. But I did want to point out that I too am in a blended family. And I had my first child at 37. So I was very, very independent. And so it is a change for me, motherhood, in terms of, I lived a very, I would say, selfish life, especially I was pursuing acting, right? So actors, it's all about, what's going on with you and yada, yada, yada. What is my motivation and whatnot. And so it is a balance, both marriage and motherhood. And what I realize is that I need my me time, and setting those boundaries for, both my daughter and my husband. Like, mommy needs a little time to decompress from her day because everyone needs me at work, and then my daughter needs me and things like that. And then of course there's that mommy guilt because I am very busy and traveling, but I bring her along with me to like pretty much everything. Like everyone knows our daughter. But another thing with what's going on in my life, and a really good friend of mine brought this up, is we are that sandwich generation. So my mom, she has lupus and she's struggling. So not only am I pulled at work, at home, as a wife, as a mom, but then I have the obligations of, helping out with my mom. So balance, I don't know it does
Yeah.
not really exist. But,
Yeah.
I just do my best. And every day I wake up and try to, juggle what's on my plate.
Hmm. That's a good point. With blended families, it's like instant motherhood. Same thing. I was living with my cousin and another friend, so we bachelorette pad. We're having a blast, and then okay, like you said, fell in love. Followed my heart. Fell in love with two people. My husband Claude, who not a Jonathan or a Ricky, and his then son, now my son Dorian. Like I can't go back, like this is it. And I was talking to an old friend of mine who I actually hadn't talked to in about 20 years. Like we've seen each other on Facebook. He's like, I got to catch up,
Mhm.
kids, everything. And he said, when did you have your motherhood moment? Like, when did you realize? And it was a funny story that I don't think I was pregnant yet, but my oldest son, so now they're 20, he's 23 now. He was having a sleepover and he had a friend here and the friend who we're close to, Cam, I'm gonna just call him out, Cam. So Cam is grown, he's a fireman now. He's a kid. He looked at me and said, Auntie Heather, I'm thirsty. And my world froze because it was like, I am responsible for this child's thirst. Like, my mother is not here saying, girl, we got bottled water and lemonade in the thing. It was all on me. And I froze and I heard him go, Auntie Heather, Auntie H. And I was like, yes, yes, I got you. But it was that moment of, it's all on me, like in an instant. So it was both motivating and terrifying. But again, that instantness with a blended family. And like I said, being perfectly transparent, we made the choice to have another baby pretty quickly. So Claude and I feel like in a lot of ways, we're getting to know, as the kids get older, we're still getting to know each other. When our middle son was 3, we were having a heated conversation. He was like, Heather, we're 3 years old. We're the same age as Damani, our son. And I was like, and Damani bumping into stuff and, picking his nose. I was like, that's the crystallization of who we are and how well we know each other, is that 3-year-old child. So every now and then we're like, we're only a teenage, we're only this, and still getting to know each other because we had that parenthood. We wouldn't change it for the world, but it's like, yeah, that's right. We were doing a lot, all at one time. So I appreciate, I love a good blended family story, and I respect it. And I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that aspect. And so I think when I think of balance, I love the points that have been put out. For me, it's about grace. I'm learning to give myself grace in moments to be able to juggle motherhood and being a wife and being an
Mhm.
executive, but I'm also learning to say no. I think I am
Mhm.
very much present. My phone doesn't turn off when the emails come in. I reply right away. And so I've dedicated time when I get home. Put your phone down, and I'll lose it. I'm really good at losing my phone. And so that helps. And so I'll lose the phone and I'll really just focus on my kids, watching movies, helping with homework, ensuring that I'm fully present, because I had a realization a few months ago. My daughter came up to me and she was like, I was going to ask you for something, but I know you're busy. And I was like, no, 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 I'm never too busy for you, you know? And so I was like, I never want that to be the experience that you get from me. And so I'm giving myself grace and understanding that motherhood and being a wife is a learning journey, and that I'm not going to get everything perfect, but I'm doing the best that I can.
That's great.
I really appreciate that because, I mean, I don't take calls necessarily in meetings with clients, but I will say if my kid calls, I'll say like just a minute. And I think part of the going out on my own was because I really wanted to embrace real life. Not only my real life, but my clients' real life. I had, one of my early clients, we put a strategic planning project on hiatus for 3 months because her mother was in hospice with cancer. And it's like, what? I'm going to say, no, we have to meet, we have to finish your strategic plan. No, I really wanted to, in a sense, I just wanted us all to have what we needed, and we can still make the project work and get to where we need to be. And phones are good things and phones are not good things.
Right. Right. So I have one more question before we do our kind of our closing ritual or a closing moment. But before we get into those two things, does anybody have any wisdom or something that they wanted to share that maybe we didn't get to, whether that's wisdom about motherhood or leadership. We shared a lot. I don't expect anybody to have any. I think we left a lot on the floor, as the kids say. So, um, as you're thinking of that, and like I said before, we move into just a couple of more things. I just want to, this Women's History Month, to the ladies that are here and to the women that are listening, I just want to remind us how important it is to lean on each other. Whether you're in a room and you see somebody and you're like, wait a minute, I've got to, you know, I got to reach back and get this person. One of my mentors, Ife McWhorter, she lives in Los Angeles now. She was one of the founders of Joseph Holmes Dance Company. We worked together at the Park District. And one of our early meetings, we were in cultural programming together. And I went into the meeting and I came out and I was kind of dejected. She was like, what happened? I was like, they don't listen to me. I was trying to say so and so and blah, blah, blah. And I'm 29, first job in this kind of arena. And she looked at me and she was like, you should have stood on the table. If you have to move the chair, and anybody that knows Ife knows I'm doing a bang on impression of her. If you have to stand on the chair and bang a pot for them to hear you, that's what you have to do. And I so appreciated her giving me voice and making it okay. And she was also the type of leader that would just say, go to the meeting, tell me about it. She didn't like walk me through, and it's really made me the leader I think I am today. So I just want us to remember to look out for each other. And if you see that woman in a room or hear of somebody that you think may need that extra push or not, maybe it's somebody that's already there and you're like, yes, yes, I'm going to continue to cheer us on. I think we all come from that, but I just want to remind us all that we should kind of keep that going, not just this month, but at all times. So any last bits of wisdom that you wanted to share that you didn't get to, and then we'll get into our quotes. Okay, we did it. I think we got it. So I also wanted to close with either each of you sharing, and I'll go last, either a book or a quote or something that you would like to share with people. Or maybe it's like that story I just told, a woman that did something for you, or somebody we should know a little bit more about. Who would like to share? Anybody go.
I can share. So I can share a book. An amazing book, just reference, is Nobody Seen the Trouble. Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen by Dr. Inger Burnett Ziegler. It's an amazing book specifically for women of color. And it really pinpoints that we don't have to always be the strong ones. And I love how it pinpoints it down about, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have a soft life, as the kids call it today. So it is a gem. And if you're a woman and ever get a chance to read it, it's an amazing book.
Sorry,
No,
Amy, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nikki.
It's gonna sound cliche, but my person that I would want everyone to know and love is my husband. Just because we have built this thing together, we support each other, and I'm a huge fan of his art.
Yeah,
and
it's amazing, by the way. Yes.
And then he's the visionary of this organization, and I just love how he creates and manifests everything that we've done. Like, he's like, if you know anything about leadership, like, he's the visionary, I'm the integrator. So he has the vision. I'm like, okay, put me in, coach. I catch the ball, and then I go and execute it, with precision. But he's just, the concepts that he comes up with, and to create what he creates in his mind into his brush. It's amazing. I'm fascinated by him. I think he's amazing. I think everyone should know him.
So when I was in my 20s and my first job, my grandfather, of all people, got me a book and got it autographed. And it was called Paths to Power, a woman's guide from first job to top executive. It is probably out of print because it was published in 1980. But it had things in it that were so powerful to me. I mean, I've carried it around, and trust me, we've moved a lot. And there are a few books that still come, that come with me no matter what. But it had things in it like how to choose where you sit at a table in a meeting that that like I didn't think about. And so I mean, I remember, and I think, that it came from my grandfather, who was an entrepreneur. And I would say one of my sons identified that the fact is we are a family of entrepreneurs. So it took me a while to like go out on my own, but like it finally clicked. But it was very powerful to get that from my grandfather, who like thought I should have this when I'm out in the world. And so that was just really very meaningful. And I really learned a lot from it. That resonated with me, that kind of synced with my values and things like that. So there.
I love well, I'll just quickly, so I'm speaking to all my nonprofit girlies, as they say. This book, look at my book, Joan Gary's Guide to Nonprofit Leadership. I see some heads nodding. This woman has done so much for just her personal story of how she came to leadership and what she did with GLAD, the organization GLAD. And it is a handbook, for nonprofit. And I just think being a marginalized woman, who had to kind of fight her own path and her story, but I refer to this book often, as you can tell. I didn't realize I had all these little things in it when I grabbed it. But anything you want to know about nonprofit management, she's got it. That and the mentor story I told you. And I love that everyone's stories were a little bit different. Like Paris, somebody that wrote that book. I know Inger, she lives in Chicago, incredible. Your grandfather, Amy, at a time when I gotta guess, a lot of people weren't saying, yes, chart your own path, little girl, at that time. NIKKI, your husband, like we were saying before, you were like, it sounds cliche because we're taught that, you shouldn't lift up it's going to make you seem a certain kind of way, but that's your life partner. And in this space and all spaces, I think we should feel confident, shouting out the men that make this possible, whether that's our husbands, our grandfathers, our brothers, our sons, or whoever that may be. So I'm so glad I asked you all to share those moments. I love the
add one
absolutely
more thing?
yes.
It resonates. When my husband and I got married, he asked one thing, and that was that I would change my name and we would have the same last name. And he said, and then you can do whatever you want. And like, yeah, cool. And I have, and he supported me at every turn.
And that's as it should be. Your love story, Paris, as well. Yes.
That support is crucial, right? Having those partners that are there to lift us up and cheer us on.
Yes.
And even if, like, I know when we first did our first fundraiser here at Art Inc., it was kind of crazy for Peoria, but we both, we both are very cultured and have traveled and lived in big cities. And he told me later, he was like, I thought that was a crazy idea, but I didn't say anything.
I believed in you.
Right. And it turned out to be a very successful event. And I'm very like, oh, let's try this, let's try that. And some of those ideas can be grandiose, but he's like, okay, all right, let's do it. I'll strap on my seatbelt.
Right. I believe. Some of you all know Claude. He's got a business he's had for a year. It's called Onyx Strategic Partners. And at the kickoff party last March, I said a few words, and it was right around the time Prince Philip died. And I was like, say what you want about the monarchy, but when he passed away, Queen Elizabeth said, a lot of what I'm doing is he's giving me ideas and giving me thoughts. And I was like, anybody that's ever been to the Beverly Arts Center, Southside Community Arts Center, or Jazz Institute, there are definitely some Claude ideas here. So it's so wonderful to be able to go, how should I, whatever that may be, even though it's arts and it's a little bit different, but there are those keys. But knowing that there's somebody that believes in you and can kind of even support some of those ideas, I think is just the icing on the cake. So shouts out to the husbands as we close today. I want to thank all of you, NIKKI, Amy, Paris. This has been fabulous. And to the audience, I hope you had your notebooks out. I hope you were able to take some notes and just be inspired. I wish you all the best, your children, and your families. And I just thank you, ladies, and everyone in the audience for spending time with us today. Thank you, everyone.